Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns Those Anti-Federalists. Absolutely got it right. And this is Tom Navolis, your host. And one of the things I need to let you know right up front is that you can watch this program on YouTube and you can find that connection to YouTube at samueladamsreturns.net. And the podcasts are there as well as they are up on that Apple thing and the Google thing and on Blueberry. So all of it's available to you, as well as how the programming goes out on the couple different networks that are now available and hosting us. There's going to be a couple interesting ways that I want to do today's program. I want to talk specifically about a couple issues that came up and were brought forward to me regarding what in the world is going on, Tom, what's happening with the churches, what's questions about a particular pastor here in Northeast Ohio, and some of the comments that he made became, people are just asking me, and I'm going, man, I don't even go to that church. Why are you asking me? But I can answer in a general format. And so we'll go through that. We're also going to try a little technology trick. I don't know how it's going to work, but we're going to try it. Is that I am going to take and do a clip from an interview that Mike Huckabee did with David Horowitz. And I am going to try and meld that in, so we'll see how that works. We're going to talk about the character of Samuel Adams. And that's really important because that's really what this show's about. Two things. It's about the Anti-Federalists and it's about Sam Adams and the principles, because that was brought up by another pastor across the country in talking about, what do you expect? Some of the things that we mentioned last week, and I think a little bit the previous week, in that what are we trying to fix? What are we trying to reform? Are we trying to do the start over? Or are we trying to take and make some kind of a difference some way? And I believe that we do that through always no different than biblical principles applied in real life, what I call the extensibility of the gospel, and to the extent, what does that mean in principled living? It's about the principles. It's not about political parties. It's not about any of those other things, but it's about principles. So we're going to kind of cover that in the second segment. And then the third segment, we're going to kind of wrap all of that all together from the first and second segment and see, how it all falls out. And then try and give you something to do. Isn't it always interesting? You can sit here and you can learn all sorts of stuff, but if you don't have anything to do, what in the world was the value of me sitting here and kind of just blabbering? I see a lot of that happening, and it's all good stuff. A lot of information. What will you do with the information? So in that respect, I'm going to have to run back up to my office upstairs because I left a little piece of paper up there that has some information on it. And we're going to talk in the third segment about some training I did last week with FACL. And at the moment, I wrote down what the acronym means on that piece of paper. So you're going to have to wait to the third segment to find out what FACL means. And it's not spackle like you put up on your walls or ceilings. It's FACL. So let's get to it. So a friend of mine from Arizona sent me an interesting email that kind of falls into the whole genre of what we want to talk about. The question that came forward, the question about this pastor here in Northeast Ohio, which is a megachurch pastor in Northeast Ohio, he apparently said in one of his evening services, what is all this fuss about all of this political stuff? Why does anybody even care? What is going on with all of that? And it's obvious that this person doesn't know anything about John Witherspoon. Anyway, the point is that it's critical to understand that. As you know, and what I'm reading, and is there at samueladamsreturns.net, is the Chaplains and Clergy of the Revolution. Those guys got it. and they understood it. But there's this article that was sent to me by my friend in Arizona from Franklin Graham, and he's telling the sad truth. That he goes, time is not time is like a river. You cannot touch the water twice because the flow that has passed will never pass again. And he was speaking at a church in Jacksonville, Florida, when he said that America will not come back. America will not come back. He wrote, the American dream ended on November 6, 2012. The second term of Barack Obama has been the final nail in the coffin for the legacy of the white Christian male who discovered, explored, pioneered, settled, and developed the greatest republic in the history of mankind. A coalition of blacks, Latinos, feminists, gays, government workers, union members, environmental extremists, the media, Hollywood, uninformed young people, the forever needy, the chronically unemployed, illegal aliens, and other fellow travelers, which we know means the communists and socialists, have ended Norman Rockwell's America. You will never again outvote these people. It will take individual acts of defiance and massive displays of civil disobedience to get back the rights we have allowed them to take away. It will take zealots, not moderates, and shy, not reach across the aisle rhinos, which you all know what a rhino is. It's not that thing with the big tusk, it's those Republicans in name only. And so it's not going to take them reaching across the aisle to right this ship and restore our beloved country to its former self. It's going to be people like me, completely politically irrelevant, and I will probably, I can't read the part of it, never again be able to legally comment on or concern myself with the aforementioned coalition, which has surrendered our culture, our heritage, and our traditions without a shot being fired. The Cocker Spaniel is off the front porch. The Pit Bull is in the backyard. The American Constitution has been replaced with Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, and the likes of Chicago shyster David Axelrod, along with international socialist George Soros, have been pulling the strings on the beige puppet and have brought us Act 2 of the New World Order. The curtain will come down, but the damage has been done. The story has been told. Those who come after us will once again have to risk their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to bring back the republic that this generation has timidly fittered away due to white guilt and political correctness. And I may add to that, which I think, Franklin Graham knocked it out of the park on this. Folks, that is in very much alignment to what I say that the pastors, those chaplains and clergy of the revolution preached, taught, fought, bled, and died for. Pastors, okay? And then the rest of the people, which Sam Adams, I got to tell you, well, we're going to talk about some of the Reformation perspective of Samuel Adams and the moniker that he had as the last Puritan in the next segment. And I'm also going to tease you a little bit with the alignment of some of the principles that Donald Trump holds to, that are principles that Samuel Adams clearly understood and lived. So it's going to be very interesting in the next segment. But let's continue on. He knocks it out of the park, that being Franklin Graham. And he talks about it. Now, what I say is that this pastor here, this megachurch pastor here in Northeast Ohio, the reason he doesn't get it is because he does not understand the oath that he took when he became a naturalized citizen. And in that regard, I think that's a travesty in what all of that is happening. Now, one of the surprises that I want to try and do, because I just got the 5-minute mark, is I want to try and play you a 3-minute segment. So we're going to see if this technology works, and we're going to see if I can build the video into it. But here it is. Listen to this and see what we get.
Why on earth would a Jewish guy like David Horowitz write a book defending Christianity?
No, because I realized I'm an agnostic. I was a leader of the New Left Radicals. When I saw how destructive they were, I had to reevaluate America. And I saw that America could only have been created by Christians and by Protestant Christians. We don't teach that in the schools anymore. But every value that we hold, whether it's equality, inclusion, and diversity, these are all Christian values. And the left hates them, hates Christians because they hate America. I know that Christians are focused on the next world, on saving your immortal souls. But if you don't defend your rights now, you don't defend Christianity now, you're not going to have any. There won't be churches.
David,
they will destroy them.
David, explain to me why people on the left will support same-sex marriage, they'll support transgenderism, and yet they also seem to have no problem with Islam or Sharia law, which is far harsher on these issues than Christians.
Because Islam hates America and hates the West.
Yeah, but why would liberals
the enemy of my enemy? I wrote a book actually called Unholy Alliance about this. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's all I care about. Why would they support Maduro in Venezuela?
Yeah, I mean, it makes no sense.
Well, it does if you see the world as a system of oppression where America, don't forget what the left believes. They believe what the Ayatollah Khomeini said. America is the great Satan and Israel is the little Satan. That explains it all.
Why would people say, let's tear it down? Why wouldn't they say, let's just get us a one-way ticket to one of those better places like Venezuela?
I actually had a plan to create a Fulbright scholarship for leftists that would send them to the country of their choice, but one way.
See, I think that makes more sense. But I'm serious. Why would they think it's better to tear down this country?
They're delusional. If you remember, I mean, we had, when our foreparents were in the Garden of Eden, it was better than socialism. The fruit fell from the trees, you didn't die, you didn't have pain. But there was one thing that you shouldn't do. The Lord had forbidden you to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that, it's like a diet where they say the only thing you can't eat is carrots, and that's all you want.
Trust me, I've never wanted carrots. I can tell you that.
People are ornery. That's the lesson. And what did the serpent say to Adam and Eve? If you eat of that tree, you shall be as God. Every leftist has that arrogance. They think they can remake the world. Just look at the Green New Deal that this idiot woman is proposing.
So that becomes an interesting perspective that goes to all of the core issues, is starting from Satan wanting to be God. That takes it into a whole perspective of what is idolatry. And idolatry is the perspective of us wanting to be God, ancient and modern alike. I'm going to put a link to another little clip by David Wells from his book, God in the Wasteland, and where he's talking about this idolatry and the fact that it's real easy to create your own God, whether it's environmentalism, whether it is anything, yourself. That's what we're all about, right? In our culture today, is it's all about self this, self that, a little bit of self here and there. But it comes down to that total essence of the battle is that we're not God. We can't be God. And when we take and we make government or the solution of government into a God and expect that to save us from anything, boy, we're missing the mark in totality. Go read a Genesis again, and one of the things that was remarkable to me, and actually in Exodus, is the idea that when they were up against the Red Sea, the cloud and pillar of fire, one and the same, moved behind Israel and in front of the Egyptians. It was darkness of the cloud that faced the Egyptians and the fire and light that faced the Israelis. So Sam Adams understood all of that, and he will come back with you in the next segment. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this third segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those Anti-Federalists, they got it right. And you didn't have to wait till next week to come on back. I just got ahead of myself in timing and thinking and all the information that I always try and get out to you. It was like I was ahead of myself. So we're doing that back to the future kind of step right now, in that this third segment we'll pick up from that last segment and talking about Samuel Adams a little bit more, and some of those characteristics that I found similar to Donald Trump. So I think this will be interesting for you folks that are listening at Dr. Mike's program, that you don't always get the middle segment. So you could find that at samueladamsreturns.net and catch some of the earlier portions of what I was saying on those comparisons between Donald Trump and Sam Adams. But one of the places where I left off, that Sam Adams was different in so many different ways, and because we don't know exactly the faith of Donald Trump, obviously the characteristics of the last Puritan necessarily don't fit Donald Trump, but the other characteristics, the Jeffersonian characteristics, I think do. So let's pick up with that statement here that I kind of clipped as we ended segment number 2. That in this book by Dr. Fellow is where he was talking about, but though he was deemed straight-laced in his theological belief, he was just as liberal in his political creed. And liberal not meaning the liberal ideas that we have today, and that I talk about in my book, that not all conservatives are constitutionalists, and also in my second book references what the difference between liberal at that time and modern liberalism is. So with that, he was liberal in his political creed, meaning, here's the answer, that at once he was a Jeffersonian and a Calvinist, all in one, a Jeffersonian Calvinist. So when people ask me, hey, Tom, what are you? I go, I'm a constitutionalist, anti-federalist with a Puritan bent. So that's an easy definition, right? Figure that one out. So as we continue a little bit more, is that when we're considering if there was any fault found in Samuel Adams, he had these, what they would say about, let's see, in his broad democratic principles, and because of his tendency and energy in maintaining them, that he was white-livered, indifference is always disgusted and annoyed with earnest convictions. That's what people complained about with him. He was the animating spirit of that band of immortal Americans of whom we shall never grow weary of speaking of, unless you're in Harvard, unless you're in Yale, unless you're in the West Coast. Wait a minute. Unless you're in any university, or unless that includes Christian universities, except for a couple. Well, I have to start rendering it down to maybe one or two, and one of them being that college, that university up there in Michigan. But even the so-called Reformed Christian colleges don't really speak of the truths of our founding. Otherwise, they'd be studying in detail the chaplains and clergy of the Revolution. And we wouldn't have a pastor of a megachurch in Northeast Ohio asking, what's the big deal about all this political stuff? Anyway, so he was among all of the greats. And he was known. Oh, here's a little tidbit out of this book. Did you know that Paul Revere, that ingenious goldsmith, he would engrave lampoons, rally a caucus. He had the capacity of a dentist to fit teeth for any who needed that service, which he warranted they could talk with if they could not eat with. I think that's really interesting about, anyway, we're talking about the whole idea of Sam Adams. Now here's one that all of us should be proud of if you study the Constitution and the foundation, in truth and in principle. Again, these books down here and my books up here on the bookshelf for those that are watching the program, and why I don't have here, as I knock on the wall, the my JD degree, because as the Tories wrote in England, is that the young Bostonians are bred up hypocrites in religion and pettifoggers at law. Pettifoggers at law. And they named Sam Adams as the angel of darkness with the whole thing. Oh, there's Sam Adams. So being a pettifogger in law means that they studied, as I've told you before in so many other programs, is that they understood the English Constitution and the laws of England better than most. And that was the common people, you and me. Okay, you didn't have to have a law degree to know fact and truth. So Governor Bernard wrote, with a strong expletive, which I'm not going to say what it is, Samuel Adams, every dip of his pen stings like a horned snake. Thank you, Donald Trump. Every tweet you send can sting like a horned snake for all of those that are out there that, anyway, I love it. I love it. So, those are some of the ideas of that personality and of that character between what I was saying there in the first and second segment. Where I am, my 8 minutes left? 8 minutes left. So where I wanted to segue a little bit and where your homework is going to continue, and that homework is part of going in and just reading maybe just the beginning of Samuel Fallow's, what I have in the references there for you on this great American, Sam Adams, and just even this whole introduction portion of it. But I thought it was interesting is that David Horowitz was bringing up that whole idea from the first segment as to why we have so much going on with the left, the liberals, the socialists, the communists, the haters of America, the jihadists. And I kind of teased you with it, was this 1837 book that is the lectures illustrating the contrast between true Christianity and various other systems, that was written by Dr. William Sprague. Sprague wrote a number of different books. Actually, he picked up in the writings about Sam Adams. So this is, I would say, a theologian that is actually doing history, or a historian that is actually a theologian as well. But I wanted to go over some of the lectures. And I'm telling you, if you read these lectures that were written then, once again, ladies and gentlemen, they apply now. I just don't get, well, I do. For a bunch of the Pilot, Hyatt, and Deeps, and if you don't know what that is, it's a PhD. So the Pilot, Hyatt, and High Deeps out there have to do stuff, to keep their tenure at their universities. They got to dig it and pile it high, and they got to dig it deep. So the Pilot and High dig it deeps here in America, especially at the communist institutions, that I'm so happy that Donald Trump did the executive order that he did, that if we start defunding these communists, maybe we can start doing something. But, until churches like the mega church here in Northeast Ohio and the other mega churches across the country start understanding the fundamental principles of Americanism as the clergy and those chaplains of the American Revolution did, you're not going to change a whole lot of anything. So then, from that first segment, maybe Franklin Graham is kind of right, because until we wrap the education system around, it's a mess. So let's see. Lecture number one. Lecture number one, Christianity contrasted with atheism. Wow, what an interesting chapter. I'm telling you, you just got to dig into that. And it's like the apologetics is no different in 1837 than it is today. Go figure that one. It's the same. We stand on the biblical truth of the salvation message applied in every aspect of life, and the contrast between the appeal of ideology to that of you're not God. Anyway, let's see. Lecture number 2, Christianity contrasted with paganism. So it takes it into that extra deep move of what we're seeing in our modern time, where all these witches and warlocks and Satanism and all of that are coming out pronounced and even given room on college campuses to hold their demonic insanities. Well, let's see. Here's another one. Lecture number 3, Christianity contrasted with deism. Yeah, that's really a kind of an interesting aspect, especially when we look at environmentalism, we look at all of the greenism, sustainability. That's deism. That's deism. Interesting. Here's one that will grab you. Ready? Christianity contrasted with Mohammedism. I say it's Christianity contrasted with jihadism, with Islam. And that was written about in 1837. And ladies and gentlemen, it's no different. It is an invalid place to go. And based on Sharia law, it has no place in America. Or to have a bunch of jihadists sitting in the halls of Congress or bureaucracies and state legislatures or in education in America. No place. Oh, that's why they don't teach it in schools anymore, and that's why they don't teach it in even Christian universities. All right, let's see. Here we have the Protestant Christianity contrasted with Romanism. There's interesting aspects of that. We have evangelical Christianity contrasted with Unitarianism. Boy, is that ever interesting and critical to understand, because we have a lot of that insanity now. Practical Christianity contrasted with antinomianism. I never say it right, so all you theologians out there, you know what I'm saying. You can figure it out. All right, and the last one is experimental Christianity contrasted with formalism, sentimentalism, and fanaticism. Wow. This was 1837, doing all these different contrasts. And what we see today is we still have everybody hammering and trying to bring in all these new ideas. And because, as I have said, is that Sam Adams, and those anti-federalists, because I always say the anti-federalists got it right, because what they said is if the pulpits didn't do their job, and we always had a moral and religious people, you can't self-govern. You just can't do it. And Sam Adams understood that right. As the father of the American Revolution, he knew that it was God in control. And if you only read the New Testament, you kind of get that. But it takes reading the Old Testament to understand that God is involved in politics. You know why? Here's a quick one. You know why Israel was not led directly to Canaan? You know why that happened? Because God said they would be afraid of war. They would be afraid to go to battle. I think that's what's happened in the church today. Most Christians, because they are afraid of battle, afraid of war, afraid of taking and standing up for liberty as it is taught by Christ in totality, example, as well as living it within the whole framework of the scriptures. We're stuck having to get our front ends up against the Red Sea and Pharaoh and his crowd on our back end. And that's where we are. But God parted the sea and he swallowed Pharaoh. But are you willing to cross that Red Sea? come on back next week when Sam Adams will return. The Anti-Federalists got it right, and we will continue on a principled matter. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those Anti-Federalists, they absolutely got it right. And this is Tom Navolis, your host. And I want to let you know that I am definitely happy to be here on Liberty Works Radio Network as a primary station that I'm at. And I'll tell you what, there is some really great programming. I know I tell you that every week, but I just been seeing some of the stuff that they've been doing live during the week. And good stuff, folks. Really good stuff. I know there's so much that you can listen to. There's so much that's out there. But I would ask you, please take and listen to some of the other programming here at Liberty Works Radio Network. And as I always do, please hit that donate button. Keep the network live and going and vibrant for you, because Liberty works for you here. Now let's talk about Sam Adams a little bit, because as I mentioned in the last segment, is that there is that issue about principles over everything else. And there's going to be a few things that I'm going to say here and read here that what I would like you to do is to look at or listen to. So those that are watching, I'm not going to hold up what I'm reading for you to look at, but go to the references that are everywhere at SamuelAdamsReturns.net for today's program. They're there in the YouTube post, and they're always out in the promo in those references. Go look at the references, and you will be able to read then what I am saying, and look at these principles that Samuel Adams exhibited, and look at the ones that I think Donald Trump is exhibiting. Now, I guess it's more of a God thing for him than anything that he's really studied from my perspective, because I don't know the man. I don't know what he has studied. I don't know what his relationship is with the living God. But I do know that in the common sense, pragmatic manner, and to the extent that he really knows how to rile up the establishment and the media, he is so like Sam Adams that I just go, yeah, give me a high five, Donald Trump, because it is amazing to me that the father of the American Revolution, some of those very similar principles that he did to get America kick-started, so too is Donald Trump doing as President of the United States right now to get it kicked back in the right direction. We are and have been in a revolution. The communists have been the primary revolution. The jihadists have been the primary revolution. Let me stop for a second there on that one. So something that I have in the references that you need to take a look at is an 1837 book that blows your mind. And this goes to the first segment as to why so many pastors just don't get it. Then I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, probably in the third segment, is this book called Lectures Illustrating the Contrast Between True Christianity and Various Other Systems. I'm going to leave the content of that book into the third segment, but this was 1837. And this was 10 years, when we get into it into the next minute, 10 years before what? Karl Marx basically came out with his Communist Manifestos. But anyway, so last week I mentioned a book by Samuel Fellows, and it's there again in the resources for you to take a look at it about the great Americans in history, being this book is on Samuel Adams, and that history is, what it is. I gave you a long quote on that. It's in the promo, and just jumping through all of these other voices, and that English and American history are full of dramatic incidents. Now, where I wanted to go was into the character building here of Sam Adams, itchy nose. That Charles I, he unfortunately lived again in the spirit of George III. You see, that's what they were dealing with in England. And that the conflict with this monarch, who was not king by divine right, but by the forbearance along the sufferings of a trodden down people, sprang the Puritan age. And this is where Sam Adams ended up getting that whole moniker, the last Puritan, because of what was happening and even transitioning in the 1700s after the First Great Awakening and many other aspects of what we're going to get into from a character perspective. The whole, he talks about in this writing on what happened there, what was going on with the English people, and the differentiation between the southern states in England and what was happening in New England. And New England were of that Puritan contrast compared to those in the southern states that were more cavalier. And that's why I think we had a lot of the problems that we had with slavery in America versus not being so in the northern states. But there's a long history and story to that, and many others have written, and I don't want to even get sidetracked to that. So New England, and today being in the 1800s when this was written, was complex as a population has become. While it is true that there were many from New Ireland and New Germany and New France, it is still New England in the broadest sense of the terms, which dominates and prescribes the institutions which shaped this great republic and the ideas that controlled its destiny, except for the insanities that are happening at Harvard right now. I mean, anyway. Oh, so the Teutonic people handed down to their English descendants the folkmote. And I talk about that as Sam Adams when I do him in character. And this was the town meeting where everybody showed up. Everybody, including, as they say, the village idiot, had a right to a voice there. Then it incorporated the whole ideas of a true republic. That was something that was important. One of the things that happened too is that even before the colonies were, 5 years old, they were taking and already establishing how they were going to fight against England. I mean, that's really amazing in and of itself. When we look at what happened during the whole war for independence, it goes on to say that New England furnished 118,251 of the 231,791 Continental troops called into service. Wow. Massachusetts contributed more than 1/4 of that number, 69,907 men. So it was this continuous impact, great impact that the New England had. So Boston led the whole deal in Massachusetts, and who led the whole aspect of things in Boston other than Sam Adams. And we just continue to go on in learning more about some of the fundamental history. Let's jump on down to this whole aspect of the character points that are very, very important here. Is that what we have is that the merchants and traders that selfishly sided with Parliament for the restriction of the American trade were not the English nation. So you have to get that straight. It was not the people of England, nor were the churchmen that would have crushed out the nonconformity, imposed a haughty, mitred prelacy upon unwilling and remonstrating religionists, were not the English people. Okay, so and that's talking about the Church of England versus the Puritans versus the Congregationalists. Actually, it was that the gallant British tars, when they went out, you heard it before, they were singing, that being the big ships, rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves, Britons never, never will be slaves. Whoa, stop right there. You see, what that was is that the American colonists understood that Britons never, never will be slaves. We're down to 5 minutes already, and I haven't even gotten into the character of Sam Adams. Oh, my goodness gracious. Well, we may definitely are going to carry this into next week because I just ran out of time in relationship to that. So, boy, I'm going to have to jump way down here in that Sam Adams, you know what? He was the guy that started a newspaper, one of the early newspapers there in New England at the time, and he wielded a ready pen, Twitter, and could put into clear, compact, and sturdy English, easily comprehended by the common mind, his calm or burning thoughts. He conducted the first political newspaper published in Boston. He mastered thoroughly the principles of the English Constitution and his fearless application of them to the poor and lonely. To those who wore the leather cap and worsted, he received the proud appellation of the Tribune of the People. The Tribune of the People. I think that's what, we can almost say if people really understood what that meant from learning the ancient history of Rome, that a tribune was someone that was close to the people. The Tribune of the People, Donald Trump. He could wield a ready pen, and he could put into that. He has a keen intellect, a fascinating personality, persuasive talk, indomitable courage, New York scrapper. Well, this was the Boston scrapper. Spotless integrity. Well, people complain about that with Donald Trump, but Sam Adams had spotless integrity. Unwearied energy. Wow. Unselfish devotion, broad sympathy, with an unshaken faith in God, and the divine decrees were among the elements of his massive strength and commanding influence. Now, those last portions of that comment, I don't know Donald Trump personally, so I can't speak to those, but what has been written here about Sam Adams is without question that he understood the fundamental principles of the Reformation that he garnered from his years of education as well as from his mother, those Puritan ideas and truths that, here's the secret. The secret is, going back to that first segment, hey folks, you're not God. Hey liberals, you're not God. You can't recreate the world in an image of Karl Marx. You can't recreate the image of the world into Maduro. Help us. We don't want that one. You cannot recreate it because God's already created it. We're supposed to exercise according to God's purposes. And that's what Sam Adams was always able to weave into the truths of bringing about America and the American Revolution. He had the peculiar instinct of genius that led him to acts, which, as Voltaire said, foolish men call rash, but wise men brave. That one I have to give to Donald Trump. That one I have to give to him. He has an instinct, a peculiar instinct of genius, and he acts. Without question, he acts. The sternness of his purpose and the austerity of his religiousness won him the name the last Puritan. Again, I can't claim that to Donald Trump because Donald Trump's not austere, and we know that there's different aspects of what he has gained in wealth that is quite different from the how poor Sam Adams ended up being. But the fundamental characters of the title for Sam Adams, the father of the Revolution and the last Puritan, in the one who best embodied the spirit of the American contest for political and religious freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, he's wrapped up in this other idea of being that he was at once Jeffersonian and a Calvinist, all wrapped into one. I think that's just remarkable about just some of those quick character snapshots of Sam Adams, and I think that there's, those interesting few parallelisms around Donald Trump as well. So what's the homework for you? I think it would be just to go read through again what I put up there last week and again this week on Samuel Fallows. We're talking about Samuel Adams because he has returned. And come on back next week.